Chapter 9 is quite a direct chapter. In it we have Sun Tzu giving directions to generals, telling them exactly how to position themselves and fight depending on where they are. After crossing a river, get far away from it, camp in high places facing the sun, and do not move upstream to meet an enemy. Most of these pieces of information won't have too much applicability to League of Legends, but there are some very important things that he mentions that you should all take away. For example, Sun Tzu says many a time that there are tells that your opponents will have in battle, giving clues telling what they're doing. When the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, he's relying on the natural strength of his position. When he is aloof and tries to provoke battle, he's anxious for the other side to advance, and if his place of encampment is of easy access, he's tendering a bait. While you may not be able to apply all of these directly to League, it's very smart to remind yourself every once in a while that there will always be things that you can observe to get a good understanding of what it is that your opponent is planning. Some will be obvious, like a support dancing alone right next to a brush. That's probably a bait. But even the small things, like just noticing that bot went MIA after your bottom lane backed, can show that they might be stealing blue, doing dragon, or taking their red. There are plenty of strategies a team can follow in League of Legends, and there will always be things you can observe to see just what they are. If you stay alert, keep important areas warded, and have proper positioning, you should be able to react and counter most of your opponent's decisions. Sun Tzu also makes mention of the fact that there's plenty of things that you can notice that will give clues showing if the enemy is starting to fall apart. If there's a disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banners and flags are shifted about, sedition is afoot. And if the officers are angry, it means the men are weary. This is also really prevalent in League. There are plenty of signs that you'll be able to see if the enemy team is really struggling and is starting to go on tilt and fight with each other. There are some obvious examples, like if your opponents are outwardly arguing in all chat, then it's clear that they're not getting along very well. But also look for the little things. Sometimes you'll be able to see just by clashing play styles or by the way their team behaves when team fighting. Something as simple as a lot of people standing around can show that the enemy team is just typing up a storm at each other. They clearly have a lot to say, and most of it's probably negative. If you do come across a situation like this, it's important to recognize your opponent's dysfunction so you can take advantage of the fact that they'd rather focus on arguing in chat rather than playing the actual game. And finally, I want to bring up a point that Sun Tzu mentions towards the end of the chapter on line 42. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive, and unless submissive, they will be practically useless. Now, what Sun Tzu is saying here is if you're a general, you have to make sure that those who you command respect you and will listen to your orders. If they prove to dislike you or just flat out hate you, you won't get their best out of them, and they'll just end up dragging their feet when told to do something. More importantly, though, no amount of punishments or discipline will fix this. If you're a player playing a game of League and you try to assume some sort of leadership role, or if you're just planning on being a vocal person in chat for the game, don't immediately start insulting people for feeding first blood, dying to a gank, or whatever. The same principle applies here. No one will take you seriously, no one will let you lead the team, and you'll probably end up hurting a lot more than helping regardless as to whether you had good intentions or not in your criticism. Build up a bit of a relationship with your team first, and prove that you'll give friendly and helpful advice before criticizing. Criticism is important in places, but it's also really important that you give your team a reason to listen to you and to trust your criticism before outwardly calling people out on their mistakes. If you keep all this in mind, you should have a much easier time reading the enemy team's movements and also keeping your team fairly friendly while still very focused on the game.